The Freeze.
Podcast.
The Freeze.
Podcast.
The Freeze. Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Freeze Podcast, the podcast about hip-hop chatter. Today, I want to discuss The Heart, Part 5, Future, the Toxic King, and Jack Harlow being mid. It's a doozy, folks. A lot of hip-hop content to divulge in. The first thing I want to talk about is the Future album that I guess chronologically kind of comes first. And Future's back. He's back with the project titled I Never Liked You, meaning Future is embracing his toxicity. That's sort of become, kind of a viral Twitter meme these days, that Future is a toxic king, and he's definitely leaning into that. Now, Future, not only leaning into his supposed toxicity, Future seems to also be rehashing already kind of visited territory with a lot of production, sounding eerily similar to early tracks. In fact, it almost kind of, this album, I Never Liked You, in a way kind of almost sounds like a greatest hits, but with newer verses in a way. A lot of people, from what I've been seeing in terms of like album critiques, have been saying that, again, like Future is rehashing already visited territory, so much so that it feels like he's on autopilot. And I don't know, I kind of disagree. I feel like there's a continuity to Future's music, and this is like sort of the extension of basically like the music that he was making from Hendrix on, right? So that's where it sort of started, and that's sort of where we could trace back the idea of Future embracing the toxicity, but also his more like R&B kind of crooning sounding songs as well. So I feel like this album, shouldn't be discounted. There's continuity there. And Future, being the toxic king that he is, has enlisted the help of Kanye West for a track. So the track that I'm, of course, talking about leaked a while back with, Ye's verse being leaked as he was in the process in an embittered legal dispute with then wife Kim Kardashian, and then obviously them subsequently divorcing. And things got definitely a bit ugly, but at the time, like, Kanye was definitely trying to spin this narrative of him trying to win his wife back and so on and so forth. And this sort of kind of led up to the Pete Davidson beef, and that's sort of kind of ongoing as of right now, as of this recording. And Kanye is always good for a verse. He's always good for a hook. The song, as toxic as it may be, is undeniably catchy, with a chorus that goes so hard and so undeniably catchy that I've caught myself just singing it from time to time. And, that kind of can be said for a lot of songs on this album. Future, if, for one thing, makes catchy, captivating music, even if it's a lot of it is kind of not well rehearsed. What's the word I'm looking for? It's, some of it can be repetitive with the themes and topics, but there's a reason why Future is a popular mainstream artist, and that's because he knows how to kind of bring those earworms out. And again, he does that here. So that being said, as much as I did like this album as opposed to maybe some other reviewers, I do find that Future does cross into tasteless territory throughout the album a few times. Fort Nut is particularly egregious. Future, himself is so clearly not even he's disinterested on his verse. It's really kind of lackluster, where Gunna's verse is just gross, and Young Thug sounds like he's doing a Playboy Cardi impression, and the lines on the song are just kind of like cringe. That being said, Puffin on Zooties. So production-wise, it sounds like a remix almost to March Madness, with a chorus that demonstrates why Future is the mumble rap godfather. And I found that a couple times where like Future's doing this like mumble rap chorus that's like so long that would be very long for a regular artist, but he kind of like mumbles his way through it. And it's like like his cadence is undeniably catchy, and it works. So throughout the album, there are references to Canada and Toronto, and actually, I'm finding that um, interestingly enough, kind of happening more and more often with more popular albums these days where there's references to Toronto. And it seems like now Toronto is getting, obviously because of Drake, kind of getting the international recognition of being a music city and kind of being noteworthy, like on the map, so to speak, right? So that's kind of interesting. I mean, for obviously Future has his friendship with Drake, but for him to specifically mention Toronto, I thought that was interesting. So let's see. Speaking of which, of Toronto in Canada, "Wait for You" is an absolute highlight on this album, which of course was made into a video where, again, leaning into the toxic king persona, Future plays a toxic king, and Drake is sort of like his messenger, and the video is kind of funny, and it just like the song is an absolute vibe, with Future sounding downright mournful about a relationship that's gone wrong, and this girl that's like calling him, and he doesn't really want part of it because like she's sort of messy, and all these things happening, right? Now the next track, "Holy Ghost," is probably the most different I've heard from Future. The beat intensifies, and Future subtly changes his flow. Like I find it really dope. And there's this line where Future says he's cleaning his cars in the rain. He's got OCD, and he's talking about keys, and it's just like kind of alluding to his paranoia. And obviously with the YSL and Young Thug, and being a story that broke recently, with rap lyrics, I think, being used as part of the prosecution. I think that's an interesting thing as well. So the Kodak Black feature here was interesting. It was an interesting choice. Yeah, that's all I'm really gonna say about Kodak Black. I mean, he's a very controversial artist. I'm not really gonna touch on that. I thought the chorus was interesting. I was reading some Genius annotations, and they were saying that Kodak Black is Haitian. He's kind of talking about like angels and demons, and it had to do with that sense of like Haitian spirituality. So overall, I think in hindsight that this album will be considered one of Future's best, so one of his best projects. People are just kind of burned out on this kind of material, I think, so they aren't ranking it as high. But the production is solid, and Future has some interesting bars, like that OCD bar, "Cleaning in the Rain." That like for some reason that stood out to me. And like I said, the track with Drake is great. Puffin on Zooties is another like banger. And the sequencing from Voodoo to The Way Things Go was S tier. But the album does run a little out of steam at the end. I will admit that. So yeah, could have done with some editing, put some songs to the chopping block, like a lot of albums these days. But overall, I was a fan. I think it should have gotten probably better reviews than it did overall. So those are my thoughts on the Future album, and probably the project I've listened to the most as of this recording. The Kendrick album did come out recently. Haven't fully listened to that. I maybe listened to the first quarter of it. And of course, the Heart Part 5, which is the next topic I want to talk about. So, Life is Perspective. Kendrick has, is teasing his new album with a single, and fans were on the edge of their seats. As Kendrick fans, we've been waiting years for an album, for a taste. So much so that there was an infamous tweet that has since gone viral, where basically he said, this tweeter said that, Kendrick is not dropping an album anymore. It seemed like he was kind of off TDE, and sure enough, this album is actually the last project that will be on TDE. And yeah, the thing is with the Heart series, and I didn't even know this, I guess I'm not as big of a Kendrick fan as I thought, that whenever Kendrick puts out the Heart, that usually means a project is on the way. So when he dropped the Heart Part 5, there was a lot of anticipation So I'm just going to pause it right there just to quickly change batteries. And we're back. Okay, yeah, so as I was saying, fans were eagerly anticipating this album, or the album with the Heart 5, or the Heart Part 5 dropping. So the Heart Part 5 is a strong comeback, as there could be, really, with K-Dot aggressively spitting over a sample of Marvin Gaye's I Want You, with lines like pray for paperwork, but he's on paperwork pointing the fingers, and it's just, there's a lot going on in this song. There's all kinds of perspectives, no pun intended, right? So one thing that's notable about on the production side is that Marvin Gaye's estate is kind of infamous for suing people for not getting the proper clearances. So the Marvin Gaye estate doesn't just let anyone use the sample, with the Marvin Gaye estate suing Robin Thicke and Pharrell for Blurred Lines, as well as Ed Sheeran. And I think there may be a few other artists as well over the years. So it seems like Kendrick got the blessing. Maybe, well, the Heart usually doesn't make it to the albums. Yeah, maybe that's why the blessing, but it does seem that Kendrick was blessed with the sample. So that is quite an honor. And of course, Kendrick is the only artist to receive a Pulitzer Prize in sort of any modern genre, any genre of music that is not jazz. And yeah, it really goes to basically the pedigree of Kendrick Lamar's music, right? So I guess we'll just kind of jump into the analysis at this point. So what's very notable about this particular song, about the Heart Part 5, was, as I was kind of saying, or as the song alludes to, it's about perspective and about different perspectives, and Kendrick talking from the perspective of voices of different people. But one particularly noteworthy verse is where Kendrick he kind of goes back and forth in this verse, but he talks about Nipsey Hussle and his reaction to the death of Nipsey Hussle, which was very interesting to listen, because he's opening up and being vulnerable, which is hard enough for an artist. But at another point in the same verse, Kendrick literally raps from the perspective of Nipsey, trying to give his family and friends a sense of closure with words that, you would think that Nipsey would want, or you would imagine Nipsey saying, but maybe never had the chance to, saying that, he loves, his mother, his father, his brother, kind of protect the young generation, make sure they're on the right path, like that kind of thing that Nipsey was known for doing, and known for being a sort of benevolent figure in his community, and doing kind of community work, and I would argue almost even activism. Whether it really was activism or not, I guess may be debatable depending on who you talk to, I guess, but we'll call it a form of activism. And so I think that Kendrick embodies that well. So when he kind of says, I may not be able, I forget the line exactly he says, but I may not be able to touch you, but I want you, like, he's basically saying, I want you to feel the love that I had for you. And he even talks about Nipsey's killer, and kind of like, in a way, he kind of makes Nipsey to be almost like this martyr figure. It's where he's like, I forgive you. And it's like this weird thing. And this is kind of what's interesting about it, is that it's like, could Kendrick, like, obviously you don't want to put words in other people's mouths, right? And so the idea of this artist kind of saying something for Nipsey is, obviously it's done tastefully and it's done in an artistic manner. But I could also see that if from what my understanding, the family is cool with it, and his brother Sam gets a shout out as well in the song to keep going, and that kind of thing. So I definitely feel that this was something that Kendrick maybe worked with the family and addressed. because otherwise it would have been received in poor taste. And so I think that's sort of what it boils down to. But it is kind of interesting where he says, I forgive the person who shot me, or something to that effect, right? So, and he uses that also to make a larger comment about, I guess, for lack of better words, black on black violence and sort of people killing each other in their own communities and neighborhoods. And so that, Kendrick in the same vein is also trying to use this as a way to uplift the community and kind of continuing with Nipsey's spirit. So the spirit, the intention is there, and it is obviously well intentioned, right? So the other thing that's interesting about the song is, of course, the video, which was very interesting. It's a very in a way, it's very basic, but just uses advanced technology. So the video has a very interesting take on deepfake technology to actually create something that would be considered art, because a lot of times deep fakes are just used for like memes and kind of comedic effect, where this is actually what this is deepfake technology being used for artistic merit, for an artistic expression in a way that really has, I would argue, hasn't really been used before. And the video uses the references to culture to allude to black culture and black icons in particular. So, for example, this has really interesting effects, like seeing the deepfake of Kanye when Kendrick mentions his friends being bipolar and will rob you and that kind of thing. So you kind of have an idea of what Kendrick is talking about, the kind of person. But then the deepfake morphs into Kanye, and then there's a moment where there's a line where Kendrick says hurt people," which is a famous anonymous quote. But he morphs into Will Smith, who of course infamously now slapped Chris Rock as part of the Oscars, and yeah, it sort of, unfortunately, because of that, it may sort of date the video, but it is an interesting effect. There's also, he deepfakes into Nipsey, obviously, as Nipsey is a large part of the song and kind of. The verse talking about him, and the verse about Nipsey really does elevate the song to a different pedigree. And that's, I think the song wouldn't work maybe without it, but it's interesting with the, Will Smith, Jussie Smollett, I think, so who else is there? Will Smith, Jussie Smollett, and Nipsey Hussle, obviously. I'm trying to think. Oh, Kanye. So yes, and he's talking about the culture, and like I said, particularly about black culture, and in a sense, he's kind of both not critique, like he's critiquing it and sort of condemning the idea of, like, because people have that saying, right, like, do it for the culture or whatever, and then he's kind of like, but the culture can be so toxic in a way, right? So it is kind of like a love-hate relationship, but also the culture made Kendrick too, right? So that is the other thing as well. So very, very interesting, and a good teaser for the album, which just based on that song, is going to be very deep, very packed with metaphors, packed with meaning. Kendrick's always very thoughtful, very insightful, very provocative, or I should say evocative, really. Not provocative, evocative, in the sense that, there's always layers in his music. And so I will try and see if I can have maybe a deep dive and have more of a discussion on that album. But so far, from what I've heard, I'm really liking what I'm hearing. Be honest with you, I like this project more than Damn so far. It's not as mainstream or pop sounding, and it's definitely more in the To Pimp a Butterfly direction, and is introspective, but not as insulated maybe that To Pimp a Butterfly kind of felt. I'm excited to kind of just have a deep dive into it. So the last topic that I'll just run through is Jack Harlow's "Come Home, the Kids Miss You." That is a shot and a miss. So Jack Harlow, for some reason, had a bunch of goodwill on Twitter, I guess, with his like flirtatious antics and all this. And this album came out, and the tides have turned. That's basically it. And I don't know. I never really saw what was special about Jack Harlow. I did like What's Poppin', but more so for the Babies verse. Jack Harlow, and based on this album, to me, he's now just a great value Mac Miller. He's using the same flow Mac was using on Macadelic pretty much, but he's much less of an interesting writer. So honestly, the entire rap community needs to apologize to Logic for allowing this bullshit to enter the rap game, because there is nothing overtly special about Jack Harlow. I don't see his swag. I don't see him being interesting. I don't see him being a lyricist. I don't see him, again, he's not captivating. He's not as charismatic as he thinks he is. And, you know, the entire rap community kind of gave Logic a lot of shit, to the point where he wanted to quit, to the point where I'm sure, you know, Logic felt either harassed. And, you know, Logic is somebody who has been kind of open kind of with, I believe, thought, you know, mental health kind of concerns as well. And, you know, he does have that famous song about suicide. So I think, you know, we should have given, you know, Logic a break. And it's kind of interesting to me that Jack Harlow sort of gets this weird pass because he seemed cool. But I mean, come on, man. I like, what is Jack Harlow bringing to the table? Like, I really don't get it. Like, you know, there are certain white rappers where I kind of feel, you know, should have gotten a pass in a certain sense for, like, you know, like Asheroth, that was, you know, criticized for being a party boy rapper that then went into the underground and tried to pay his dues, but then he never got the same level of success, and he sort of kind of just faded away. Macklemore, who, you know, had some issues, but he definitely had a good project with The Heist. You know, that was a good album, sonically, to say the least, right? So, you know, there's I don't know. It's, I don't want to say too much about these other artists without opening another can of worms, but Jack Harlow, he's mid. He's just mid. And this album, Come Home, The Kids Miss You, the shit is trash. I've listened to it. I mean, the man, he quoted Ed Sheeran, The Shape of, like, why? Then there's another song where he says something like, "We about to feed these youngins to the metaverse." No, please, no, not the fake deep. No. And then you got Drake, the Drake track, and like, bro, Drake, this was your Jay-Z moment. You know, like, you know that song on, Thank Me Later, where Jay-Z gives his advice to Drake, you know, about how people are going to come up to him with fake beefs and this and that, and kind of like prophesized a lot of stuff. Yeah, this was your moment to kind of pass the baton, pass the torch, say something wise, and Drake comes up with some silly shit. Like, I like Drake, but this, you know, lines like, he's got his realtor playing Monopoly. Like, we get it. You rich. Not, you know. And then there's another line that continues that, like, so rich, my music's no longer relatable. Okay, yes, we've known that. You know what I mean? It's been known. So, I don't know. I like a lot of people, wasn't feeling project, which interestingly enough, got a worse review than Lil Xan's Xanarchy, or Total Xanarchy, which I called the worst album of all time in the last episode, which was kind of funny. I don't think it's that bad. Jack Harlow has somewhat of a personality, where Lil Xan is totally devoid of a personality, and he's kind of just like, if a human could be on autopilot, he pretty much was. So, I mean, those those are my takes, and oh god, yeah, I would say that pretty much ends the episode, and yeah, if you enjoyed this episode of The Freeze, please like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe on YouTube. The site, deepfreezechillin.com, isn't currently active, so I'm trying to build support here on YouTube, doing the video thing. So if you like what you see, what you've heard, or if you just disagree with my takes, like I said, comment, subscribe, let me know. Peace.